have you accepted them? They are online. No. What I'm saying is, present it like you're presenting so that you can see. We can see the people online. Can we see it so that we're trying to break the barrier between the online and the on-site? The reason why people are not very encouraged to attend online because it is so impersonal. There is no connection between the speaker and the
Not for the Gen Zs and the
Okay,
millennials.
all right. Can you, hi, Peter. Hi. This is Emma Porio,
Good morning.
Peter. Yeah. Dapat na lang. Si Estela, is she online? I'd like to greet her. Hi, Peter. You're in Davao.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, too bad that you cannot come here.
Yes, too bad. Sorry about that. But it wasn't, there were supposed to be some meetings that were cancelled, and then,
Yeah.
just to come up, I mean, it's a very important meeting here too, but I couldn't,
were you in
I couldn't
Davao
come
in December
just for one
and January?
meeting.
Peter?
Yes?
Were you in Davao in last January?
Yes.
Yes, because I stayed there. My brother, the doctor, is staying there, so I spent my New Year with them. So
Okay.
had I known that you're
Actually,
there.
at New Year, I was taking a holiday. I was
Yeah.
in
Anyways.
Sikihor. But,
Hi, Estelle. This is Emma Porio. I better. You cannot see my face. So I say, hi, Estelle.
Good morning po.
Okay. Can you see? Yeah. Since this is hybrid, we are very lucky. We have already over 70 signed up online. And we will put this in YouTube as well, okay? So we're very grateful, no? So I just wanted to, did you start? We start now. I just wanted to greet you, Estelle and Peter, and then we start, all right? Because I told them that online webinars are very impersonal. You don't have a connect to the speakers and to the audience, okay? All right, so we start now. Welcome to the April 23 series about food branding and identity. I think this issue is basically important. So I am Emma Porio, Professor Emeritus at the Ateneo de Manila, Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and project leader and principal investigator of the Coastal Cities at Risk. This event is also co-sponsored with the Sandbox Collab at the Arete, where Alfred, Tanya, and I are residents. So we are mandated to basically connect horizontally with other Arete residents, as well as vertically with the other departments. And so this I would like to locate for those who this is the first time to attend this forum. I'd like to locate this event within the larger DSA Coastal Cities at Risk lecture series on climate, society, and culture series. When Tanya asked me in December, November, I don't remember now, if I want to help her in doing the lecture series of the department, which Melise assigned her to do, I said, yeah, sure. But then when we had a meeting in December, there was, we're not clear yet on the theme, but the week before, Father Jet, whom I have established a professorial chair on climate and society, because I tell Father Jet, these meteorological models, these climate models, is not really understandable. We have to connect it to the ground. But Father Jet said to me, ba't ginawan mo ko ng professorial? Buhay pa ako. So I told him, okay, Father, I will have a climate, society, and lecture series, because by having that, it connects really the findings of the sociologists, anthropologists regarding behavioral patterns that affect really how climate impacts on ourselves. Number one, with our food consumption and lifestyle. And for me, having series on climate, society, and lecture, I want to connect the social science take on climate adaptation and mitigation. And I think in terms of food, and I will always say this, that I was inspired actually when a year ago, was that a year ago, when the Soksai had a conference, and I saw the presentation of the archaeologists about that 7,000 years ago, 7,500 to be exact. Science is exact. The archaeologists found that the people there were eating root crops. Number one, obi, because they found the residue of the starch in one of the stone tools. So for me, that was an eye-opener for me, because Philippine history is and culture is always reconciled in terms of the Spanish colonization. Magellan discovered the Philippines. That's why I always tell people, and I was studying in the US, when these Americans, they do not know they're aggressive, I always tell them, don't forget, I come from the island that killed its first tourist. Relatively autonomous identity. Anyway, so I think the findings of the anthropologists, archaeologists about our life 7,500 years ago will tell us that Philippine history, Philippine identity and culture was crafted way, way, way back. So in fact, I was telling Clara Lapos of Mama Sita, I asked her to have a stall during the Obe Festival. I told her, is it possible, you know, how many of you have used Mama Sita's food thing? Yeah. Well, when I was on the Fulbright Advanced Research Fellowship in New York, that allowed me to survive. That's why I told Clara Lapos, perhaps our dream, or at least my dream, is that, you know, those packets, you know, they are all over the world. It is through that the OFW is connected to his culture through food. I remember in my Anthropology 101 under Alfred Bennett, he told the class that culture is very much recalled, experienced, and resonates through the food that you ate in your childhood. So the OFW, whether they're in Dubai, in Europe, or in the US, or in Australia, is really reminded of their culture through the food packets of Mama Sita. So I told her the other week when I was in the degustation, I said to Clara, I said, Clara, my dream is that your recipe, like for sinigang, will include maybe kamote or obe for the starch. You know, so it connects them, and there should be an illustration, connects those people abroad who basically, in my interviews for the trafficking in women in Paris, in Belgium, and in Hawaii, they say, oh, we don't have we do not have culture. What is our culture? And they always redound to singing and dancing. But they do not think about this. So what I'm saying basically is that this lecture series, Department of Sociology, Anthropology, Coastal Cities, Climate, Society, and Lecture Series, and the highlight, we started in January with climate adaptation, infrastructure resilience, because now it's when you talk about climate mitigation, we think of seawalls and all those things. So that's one. And then second, we had Mylene Lissing, Dr. Mylene Lissing, on natural heritage, climate, and food security. Because during the floods of Carina floods in Rizal, Pipito floods in Cagayan Valley, the Christine floods in Bicol, why our cities all over the world are flooded? Because you have developed the mountains, we have bowed our mountains and the like. So Mylene and I were saying that our food security in the city is really very much connected to how we are treating our natural heritage, the mountains, the forests, and the like, and also our lack of connectedness. That's why now in my work with the LGUs, I always talk about enhanced ridge-to-reef approach. So what happens in the mountains, the soil erosion, the rapid runoff, goes down to the rivers, the siltation goes to the, and kills the coral reefs because they are smothered. Okay, so that's the issue that I really want everyone, whether physical scientists, social scientists, humanists, and artists, would realize that climate change involves everyone's multiple dimensions. And the multiple dimensions should be connected so that we can come up towards the solution pathways, okay? So, and the third, we have food gardens and community resilience, and we were very lucky that we had the Quezon City University president, Dr. Tere Atienza. I got to know her because in the Issue Center Scholarship Association in January, we honored her because she hosted the Issue Center scholars from Papua New Guinea. And that's how I met, and so it's a case wherein an LGU, most local government units now, support colleges and universities. But this one, she has connected it to the food gardens and also to the curriculum. She believes that urban food security starts with us. Because as you saw in the COVID, we're cut off. And so it tells you that rural and urban economy should be intersectional, but also there has to be relative autonomy of the food security within, but you have nothing. And then, so now we have, for April, we have environment, culture, and food heritage, and we're very lucky to have, Peter and Estela spoke, and Butch will be in charge of the whole thing of locating this whole discourse with that. So, and then on May, you have to see the title, Digging for Purple Gold, Obi and Philippine History. And so I have a broader goal, really, of connecting young Filipinos especially to the rootedness of our culture 7,500 years ago. So I will now, I'll ask Milis to give a welcome in behalf of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and of course the Rosita J. Leong School of Social Science. Mr. Butch, you have.
So I'll use this one. Yeah. Thank you, Doc Emma. That's a comprehensive introduction about this talk. But then, yes. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are celebrating two things. One is the first ever Rosita G. Leong School of Sciences Week, and of course, this lecture series entitled Protecting Food Diversity with Geographical Indications. So we live in a time of contradiction, and while global food production has increased, food insecurity continues to rise. So climate change, market concentration, and land degradation threaten the very system that sustains rural and indigenous communities. Geographical indications, or GIs, offer a way forward. So in Europe and across Asia, GIs have successfully protected products tied to place, culture, and tradition. They're not just labels. They're lifelines for local economies, biodiversity, and cultural heritage. Yet here in the Philippines, despite our incredible food diversity, we've only registered a few GIs, like Guimaras mangoes and Bicol pili nuts. So why aren't we doing more to harness this powerful tool? Today's speakers, Mr. Peter Damary and Ms. Estela Duque, we have them online, will help us explore how GIs can go beyond economics and serve as strategies for food security and climate resilience. So let's shift the conversation on how we can produce more, to how do we protect what already nourishes us in every sense of the word. So thank you very much, and let's begin.
Thank you, Milis. Now I'd like to hand over the whole session to Dr. Fernando Shalcita, our expert in cultural heritage.
Thank you, Emma. Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Good day to all of us. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Melissa, for that very good introduction. I just want to add a few words to the importance of what we are going to witness today. We in the Philippines are faced with several huamis. The earth is getting warmer. Our fields are drying up. Farmers don't have water. At the same time, however, they're faced with a flood of cheap food imports from elsewhere in the region. Food imports that are putting our traditional crops out of business. I'm talking about bawang Ilocos with this very sharp flavor, and also siling labuyo, also with a very sharp flavor. At the same time, we customers are being deprived of a wide variety of choices. So we have to face now with a more homogeneous menu. So what is the solution? Impose tariffs, which of course is very bad, as we all know from the headlines. Or is there another way out? So I'm glad that there's actually another way out of balancing local interests with free trade. So we have two speakers today. One is Mr. Peter Damary. The other is Ms. Estela Duque. Let me introduce first Mr. Peter Damary. Mr. Peter Damary is a Swiss and Briton. He's got a master's in business administration from the University of Geneva, as well as a master's in science and agricultural economics from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. Okay, he is an associate member of the Swiss Association of Agronomists and Food Technology, as well as a member of the European Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines. Right now, he's the chief executive officer of a very interesting recycling NGO called 5DOL, or Limadol. It's based in Davao, Philippines. Because they use black soldier flies, which are non-offensive, for eating waste. So it's very ecological. At the same time, he's a senior partner at RED, and it's an organization based in Lausanne, Switzerland, where they share, interestingly, a knowledge for tasty and ethical food. Reminds me of the slow food movement. So as an agronomist, he's had over 20 years of experience in research and development in rural development, in collective agribusiness projects, with particular emphasis on sustainability, meaning by that developing regional products, affixing geographical indications, promoting organic architecture, promoting organic agriculture, promoting biodiversity. He has extensive knowledge not only of the development challenges in the Philippines, but also in other parts of the region, notably Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, and Myanmar. And he has worked as an agricultural extension worker in Bulgaria and Switzerland. He has excelled in developing capacity building and training materials for farmers and collective value chain organizations. I turn now to Estela Duque. Estela Duque has a degree, is a certified architect. She has a degree in architecture, architectural history in the Philippines, New Zealand, and Australia. In fact, down to 2015, she was working and publishing in these fields. But then something very interesting happened. She was asked to help save her extended family's trees by finding an export market for its organic cacao. This was after a decade of rock bottom prices. So Estela took a different career path in the United Kingdom, where she lives, as a social entrepreneur, as a cocoa bean and chocolate taster, and food awards judge. Today, the Cablon Farms of the family produces single origin cacao, which has a market share in the fine cacao sectors of the UK, the European Union, and the USA. She's now working towards creating South Cotabato cacao with smallholders, and is very enthusiastic about building a terroir-based blend with a recognizable regional identity in the world market. So with that, I turn the floor over to Peter Damary.
Thank you very much, Professor. How do I share my screen? Okay, can you see my screen now? Yes. Hello? Yes. Yes, we can see you. I can't hear anybody. Is my Estela? Maybe you can answer. Can you see my
Yes,
screen?
Peter, you just have to put it on
Yeah.
full slide.
Okay, will do. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting set of lectures. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person, but I live in Davao, and to travel back and forth too often is not particularly good for the climate, so I only try and travel when I manage to put several meetings together if I have to go to Manila. Anyway, I will talk to you today about how a geographical indications, which happens to be my specialty, can help preserve the food and handicraft diversity of the Philippines. I'll put it, it's a new tool for the Philippines. As Professor said, the GIs have been a tool in European agricultural and rural development for many years, in France since the beginning of the 20th century, in other European countries from the 1990s. Anyway, I don't know if it's possible for people to intervene and ask questions on the way, but I would welcome that if people have questions.
There
Otherwise,
will
I
be
guess
a
we'll
Q&A, Peter. So
take their Q&A. Okay, good. All right. Anyway, just the context, I think we've already spoken about that a little bit. With food products, we've got the globalization, which creates homogenization, you know, or what we sometimes call the McDonaldization of the world, where foods lose their quality and their differentiation. There's mass industrial production, mass marketing. And what we're looking at with geographical indications is more responding to a need for more identity, differentiation, you know, specific products and so on, artisan, special qualities, and niche marketing. Okay, first I need to explain a little bit the concept of terroir, because that's really central to the idea of geographical indications. Okay, so it's a French word which is now used very often in English, even on the BBC. It was originally developed for the wine sector, but now we can use it in cheeses, in many other products, and you'll see also in handicrafts and fruits and so on. So the concept of terroir is summarized as this. You've got a set of natural resources, the soils, the animals, and so on, which are in an area. They're a given, right? And then you've got the local communities with their values and so on, who develop a know-how on how to use those natural resources. So they develop these different methodologies, and that gives something which is very specific and unique, which is not standardized, which is adapted to their area. And we call that, not yet a geographical indication, we call that an origin-linked quality product. You'll see a geographical indication is a legal term. So we have this combination of local know-how and natural resources gives origin-linked quality products. To take an example in the Philippines, the Tinalac Tao Cebu, of course from Lake Cebu in the south of the Philippines, Cotabato. You've got your natural plants conditions, so you've got abaca trees, you have lots of different plants which can provide different colors, and then you've got a whole know-how that has developed with how to extract colors from the plants and color the abaca fibers, of course, how to extract the abaca fibers, then how to do the ikat and so on, and then how to do the weaving. It's a very, very sophisticated system, which is very unique to Lake Cebu and to the Tinalac production. And then it gives this wonderful product where not only are the natural resources there, there's also the imagination, the culture of the people. So these different patterns that there in Tinalac are all inspired by what they call the dream weavers, and they're all linked to elements in their nature and in their culture and religion. I think this one represents a boutique. I'm not 100% sure, but every pattern represents something. It's not just a random pattern. Okay, so back to geographical indications. It's defined in international agreements. TRIPS is an agreement by the World Trade Organization, but it's also defined in your national legislation. Anyway, what it is, it's an indication that identifies a good that originates in a territory or region or locality of that territory where a given quality and a reputation is attributable to that geographical origin. Okay, now that's a little bit jargon, doesn't really explain what it is in normal terms. Okay, so what you need to know is a geographical indication is a legal instrument usually managed by the intellectual property offices. It's similar to a trademark, but you'll see it's different in that it's collective, and it provides the legal protection to an origin-linked product. Actually, it provides the legal protection to the use of the name of that origin-linked product, okay? It serves to increase market transparency so that consumers can find the original products, and it really is a sign that is used in the marketplace, okay? So sometimes one discusses the best ways to protect cultural heritage and so on. The geographical indication is only one tool and can only work for products which are sold in the market. It can't resolve everything, okay? There are other tools which are needed, but it's a useful tool for products which reach the market. So by protecting the geographical indication on that market, the states will protect the asset of the value chain actors who produce the product, put in their craft, their knowledge and so on into the product to make that quality on which the reputation is based. Okay. At the same time, it helps consumers identify, as I said before, the original products. So just a few examples. The most famous of geographical indications, of course, is Champagne in France. So Champagne is a bubbly alcoholic drink based on grape juice, which was developed in the Île-de-France around Paris, and has gained, of course, an enormous reputation. So today, the only people who can use the term Champagne are those who produce that bubbly alcohol in the geographical area and who respect a certain number of quality criteria. It's usually gathered in what we call a book of specification. Then there's Parmigiano Reggiano, an Italian cheese, hard cheese, also very special, very unique to its area. There are many imitations, but there's nothing that can quite quite be exactly the same as Parmigiano Reggiano from Italy. Gayo coffee in Indonesia. So you've got many different coffees in Indonesia that are marked with geographical indications. A fish sauce from Vietnam called Phu Quoc. Nuc Nam Phu Quoc. Sorry if I don't pronounce that very correctly. That's a fish sauce produced in the south of Cambodia. There's rice in Thailand. There's pepper in Cambodia. I'm just taking a few examples, actually, amongst those GIs which are the most successful. But there are hundreds and hundreds. Indonesia has several hundred. Estelle will explain to you how many GIs there are in Thailand, I believe. And of course, in the European Union, there are several thousand geographical indications. There's also handicrafts, which are GIs. So in Indonesia, there's, for example, the Sika Ikat on Flores Island, which is, the technique is very similar to Tinalak Tau Cebu, but it's made with cotton and then, you know, it has its own characteristics. And then, of course, one product which is close to my heart, which is the Bagan lacquerware in Myanmar. Sadly, not yet a geographical indications. We were working on it before this whole military takeover happened in Myanmar. It's such a sad situation there, but they've got some wonderful products there too. And for example, Lampun brocade silk in Thailand, where they have a very interesting traceability system. Okay, so the principles of a GI is that it provides an exclusive right to use the name or an indication on the product, okay? It can be a geographical name, most of the time it's a geographical name, or it can be a traditional word. For example, Tinalak is a traditional word, and that should be reserved for the original product. It carries, that name is what carries that reputation. So reputation, as you know, is very valuable. They say in trademarks, the biggest value of the trademark is not all the companies that make the product, it's the reputation. So, I mean, a product which I don't like, but which gives a good example is Coca-Cola. The trademark Coca-Cola has much more value than all the the factories that produce the Coca-Cola. It's the term which has a lot of value. So here it's the same thing. You've got the reputation in these names, which have been developed over generations, and that's what gives value often to the product. And that reputation, it says here, and or a given quality. I would almost say and, because if you have a reputation, it means that you've got a certain quality, a specific quality. Okay, it has to be used on marketable or physical products where there is that link to the geographical origin. You saw the concept of terroir I mentioned before. And of course, it's something which is inherited by a whole community. So it has to remain a collective right to that community. It cannot be privatized by an individual or by a small group. It has to remain open to that whole community. So that's what I say here. It has to remain open. So it's the use of the name for commercial purposes to all the legitimate inheritors, all those who produce in that geographical area and who produce the reputed quality. Okay, and that's defined in the Book of Specification or the Code of Practice. And it's exclusive, which means that only those people, only that group can use that name. It means producers that are outside the geographical area or who produce lower quality products are not allowed to use the name of the product, are not allowed to use the geographical indication. Okay, so it's quite a strong tool for community development in that way. So why is it new to the Philippines? IPO Phil introduced rules and regulations only back in November 2022. The first registered GI was Guimaras Mango in May 2023. There are currently 3 pending requests. I'm not sure I'll mention them, but I haven't written them down. It's Aklan Piña, Tinalactao Cebu, and Asin Tibuok, which is a very interesting product. There is currently an act on geographical indications debated in the Senate and Congress. I don't know how much time that's going to take, and of course it depends a little bit on what happens in your elections in a few days. Okay, and then also we're going to be starting a French finance project on May 1. I'm very glad to say that I will be in the team managing that project, where we will support the development of geographical indications here. So what we're going to try and do is put in place all the tools and instruments for value chain actors to apply to become a geographical indication. And in parallel, we will be working on two specific potential GIs to bring them all the way to registration. But the first act of that project is going to be to try and do an inventory of potential GIs, and for that we've developed a questionnaire, and I will be very glad if some of you can answer. If you have an idea of a product that could be a geographical indication, we will be very glad if you can answer that. I will send it, of course, to Professor Fernandez, who I hope can send it on to those of you who might be interested. Okay, the potential in the Philippines, very, very big potential in my opinion, because you've got so many different islands, so many different cultures, so many different terroirs, that really the potential is enormous. So of course in the fruit, you've got Guimaras Mango, you've got Davao Pomelo, Davao Durian, Camiguin, Lanzones, and many, many others which I don't know about yet, which I'm hoping to learn about with the questionnaire. Then you've got handicrafts, you've got, of course, Tinalactao Cebu, you've got Piña cloth from Aklan, you've got woven textiles from the Cordillera, and again, many, many other cloths which actually have been quite well inventorized, I think, in your different museums. Then it's a question of, do they want to be traded on the market, and do they want their names protected where they could develop a geographical indication. Then there are many other food products. There's lambanok from southern Tagalog, or maybe from specific regions in southern Tagalog. There's Barako coffee from Batangas. There's cacao chocolate. You say I put a question mark because I don't want to offend Estela. Is it from Cotabato? Let's see. It's certainly a potential, but there are other regions also that have potential to be geographical indications. And by the way, the tool allows that. It would allow a geographical indication on cacao for South Cotabato, and maybe one for Bicol, for Davao region, whatever. As long as there's something distinctive about the cacao or the chocolate. Then there are pili nuts from Bicol, Asin Tibuok from Bohol, and so on. And so Asin Tibuok, by the way, is a great example of a traditional name which is protected. But in the mind of consumers, it comes from a specific region, which is in a village, actually, in Bohol. Okay, and let me just finish off with a few examples of how geographical indications have helped preserve this diversity, which is so important. In cultural events, for example, in many city or valleys in the European mountains, in the Alps, you've got many traditions of bringing the cows up to the alpine pastures and so on, and that's a whole tradition, and they can stay alive, these traditions, because the product, the cheese in this case, is sold at a reasonable price because the cheese is a geographical indication, in this case the Aubrac, and it allows that cheese to be in competition with very industrial cheeses. I've got a bit of a story like that. When I was still working in Switzerland, we were working on an EU program, and we were presenting a Swiss cheese, the Gruyère cheese. And the Gruyère cheese has some 200 small dairies, plus lots of farmers and so on. And they produce this very artisanal cheese that I'm very fond of. And there was a Dutch gentleman there, and he represented one cooperative that produced the same amount of cheese as the 220 small dairies that we have in Gruyère, in a very industrial manner, with the cows going out 3 times a year to the grass, whilst the cows in Switzerland are always outside in the grass. But those two products can compete with as there's geographical indications, because consumers who want the product which has the cows outside, which has special qualities, can find it on the market. Even if it's a little bit more expensive, they're willing to pay because it's got all those extra qualities. If there wasn't a GI, they wouldn't know of these special qualities. Actually, if there wasn't a GI, that artisanal production would probably disappear. There's also, for example, Espelette peppers in the south of France. You see here they're hanging to dry in the front of the house, beautiful houses. And that attracts a lot of tourists, so that's another side benefit. And in this case, it was a revival of something that had almost died out. In the 1970s and 80s, there was hardly any farmer producing it anymore, but since they made the effort to develop their geographical indication, they were able to bring back value into the area and to continue and thrive producing this special pepper. Then it also helps with biodiversity. Again, European examples. I'm sorry, I know European examples better. But you know, when your cows go up to the alpine meadows, they eat the grasses, and that maintains a certain type of biodiversity. Okay, a biodiversity that has been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, because we've been bringing animals up to those pastures for many, many generations. Without a tool like a geographical indication, they would not be competitive compared to the industrial production, and therefore they would disappear. And then what would you have in the alpine areas? They would be covered with shrubs and would lose a lot of the biodiversity. So that's one way. It also, they often use specific breeds which are more resilient to, you know, going up to the mountain compared to Holstein, who are, you know, indoors and industrially fed and so on. So that's one way it can help biodiversity. I'm sure there are many examples of how it could help biodiversity in tropical situations. Tinalac Taosebu would be an example. I mean, with the maintaining the abaca, maintaining all those plants and so on, it's a maintenance of biodiversity which might otherwise disappear. And then, I think I've mentioned this several times, but there's maintaining the competitiveness of artisan quality in comparison to industrialization. If we don't have a tool like a geographical indication, how will you know what is an artisan product, what is a product made through all these handicrafts? You could, you know, Tinalac Taosebu or something similar to Tinalac could just as well be made by machines these days. It would not be the same, it would not have the same qualities, but you as a consumer, would you know the difference? Maybe not. So that's why it's important to have something that guarantees those special qualities. Okay, and then this is a picture of a salt in Cambodia, but again here in the Philippines you've got several different types of very interesting productions of salt, so they could all be geographical indications. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I wasn't too long. And you can always send your questions to me at this email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. This gives me hope because I'm a heritage advocate. I really am afraid of what will happen to our traditional crafts. Like right now, you spoke about piña and Cordillera textiles. They're actually endangered heavily by cheap Chinese imports in Divisoria. I remember back in the 80s, piña production actually in Aklan was actually moribund already until it was rescued by Patis Tesoro with the help of Mrs. Fidel Ramos, also known as Meng. So now it revived, but it's now endangered by these very cheap Chinese fakes coming in through the Divisoria market. And now, with that, I turn the floor over to
Talking about Tinalak, one of my MA students made a study, and that when the market came in and they wanted particular designs, and so they tell the local, this is what we want, and we will buy it. So the men entered into the weaving. So I was just talking to Christine about, things and production. So thank you very much, Peter, for all your insights. In fact, I just told Melise that next year I'd like to have a feast here of all the initiatives for GI. Still, and Peter, I hope at that time we will see you here.
I hope so. That sounds great. Just on the Tinalak question, you're absolutely right. There are also risks with any kind of approach, even with geographical indications. But if you allow we worked a few years ago on trying to develop the book of specification for Tinalak with a group of only women, actually, only the weavers. So that was important to allow them to define their quality, to define their product. And that's, the geographical indication allows them to sort of put down their identity. So they registered, for example, in the book of specification that it had to be backloom weaving. They could have said, no, we'll accept machines. But no, they said backloom weaving is important for the quality. They said only natural colors could be used. So that's basically only black, red, and white. So they give themselves their own rules, and that's very important. So, and it also, it means that the consumer that comes, he comes for that product. He doesn't come with his own idea and say, oh yes, please weave something with little boats in blue and white. Then that denatures the product completely. People can do that, it's not a problem, but it's not Tinalak Tau Cebu. Okay, so, but yes, I'd love to see that report someday, maybe, from your student. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much. Over to Esther, I guess.
Thank you, Peter. Now let's hear from Estela Duque with her inspirational story about what's happening in Thailand.
Okay, let me see. How do I share?
Estella, at the bottom of your, if you take your mouse to the bottom of your screen, you should have different pictures coming up, and one of them says
Share screen.
Yeah. I need to send the link.
You go down.
Does that work?
nope.
Oh,
Can you see the bottom? There's a share screen. Just click on it, and your PowerPoint should be open.
let's see. No, this is actually a PDF file.
It would work with a PDF file too. But go down. I think you're not finding the share screen. It's a little green box with an arrow going up at the bottom of your screen.
Would you want Leo to share?
Maybe it's easier if it's done from the Ateneo side instead. Ah, okay, share screen. Okay. So, today is it okay now?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, today I'm going to talk about Thailand because I found it really interesting that when I came across their projects in Thailand, I was quite surprised by the number of GIs that they already had. And in fact, the reason I came across their projects is because they already have GI application being organized for cacao, which is what I'm primarily interested in. And I just want to qualify that this presentation I'm making is less of a polished presentation like these, but more of a work in progress. Because as an architect, many times for us, the process is more important than the actual building itself. And I think it's important to show you all how this process works for me in that field where I'm trained in, and moving towards other areas and crossovers in my work, which is now in agriculture. Next, please. So this is just a quick list of what I present today. So I'm presenting to you the methods, a kind of process in which you could understand GI from the perspective not of the people who grant it, but the people who apply for it and the people who own it. In this case, Thailand, and possibly in the future, the Philippines. Next, please. Right, so first I will deal with the architecture. Next one. This is just for everybody out there who is firmly situated in the academe, and this is where I'm coming from. I'm looking at the framework presented by Pierre Bourdieu and the idea that material culture has a value, but it also has certain problems that it brings with it. So there are a lot of oppositions that we have to deal with it in the everyday life. And Dr. Zelsit has a lot of publications that will help you to understand this in the Philippine context. Next, please. Yes, these are the publications out there that you can look at. And I also want to make specific mention of discourse analysis, because what we are going to do here is look at the output of people who have produced both in architecture and in GI, and then look at what it says to us about the way that these things have come about. What are the problems that we need to deal with and we need to overcome? Next. Right, so I've got this little slide of methods because you will see later on, and when I finish, I have made one for architecture, I've made one for GI, I've made one for Thailand and the Philippines, and it's kind of a way for me to understand if I'm doing things correctly or if I'm doing things in parallel. And so this is more of the process again that I'm going to show. Next. Right, so this is what I've looked at in terms of architecture in Thailand. And it makes a lot of sense to me because when this book was published, I was in the class of the professor who wrote this book. And some of these drawings that I'll show you were done by me. And this is a publication, I think, I don't know which university press in the UK, maybe Oxford, published in 1998. And this is a table of contents, which we'll analyze quickly for you. Next. So you can see here that if from the same table of contents, I pulled out the dates, and then I look at the topics that he's come out with, and you can see that even if I don't ask a Thai person or I don't read any other books about Thailand, I will see that the history of Thailand goes back so early and so long in the past. And this is important because this has implications for governance in the 20th and 21st century, which in turn tells us about how the state is able to handle something like a GI application. So you see here, from 6000 BC up to 1932, what are the general themes that this author has looked at? And within the influences outside of the what we know now as Thailand, you have the cultural impact of religion. And so you have Buddhism and Taoism coming from China and Islam. So let's move to the next one. So this is me just looking at the themes within each chapter that he has written and understanding the layers of the history that they have. Now, why is this important? Because we in the Philippines have a tendency not to look at our history, which is so important. How do we defend tradition if we don't understand the context? Next one. It's the same, the second part of the book. And it talks about, here you can see the Chinese architecture, the foreigners at the gate. And here we have the Western ideas that begin to penetrate the country. Migration, colonization, etc., the Burmese. And so this is the book that we're looking at. And we're going to look at quickly the images that they present. Next one. So now this is really interesting for me as an architect because look at the dates. 663 AD, you have the Mon culture already. And then 1500s, that's the 16th century, Ayutthaya is already a city. So this is even before the Spaniards arrived in the Philippines. So this foundational layer of urban culture that they have is something that nobody can ignore. Next one. So what are the architectural types that we have? So we have the temples. Now, as soon as religion becomes entrenched in a certain place, you will have temples. And you have temples that survive to this day, or you have the floor plans of these particular temples that may have disappeared, but you can still trace them in the records, in the texts, in the images, in the ruins. Okay, so this is architecture as evidence. What is the evidence of this history? Next. So this is the transformation of royalty, or what's supposed to become the state, into an empire. And then here we have a temple which was constructed at a very early time, 15th century, 1488, which is the era of King Taidok. Next. And here we have the royal architecture and the domestic architecture. And here is the third conclusion that we can take from this book, is that these cultural influences have an impact on style and planning. And we have to deal with this because it's embedded in the culture, and we have to recognize how it transforms itself in other ways. Architecture is not the only way that it manifests itself. Next. And this one is something that I know very well because I lived and worked in one of these for 2 years in Singapore. And this is the Chinese shop house in Thailand. So I don't know what historically it might have been like in the Philippines, because we do have a long tradition of Chinese migrants. But specifically in Singapore, this is a part of the domain which has gentrified, and presumably so as well in Phuket, as we can see here. So this is the last evidence that I will show as architecture. I'll move to the next one. So look at this list of conclusions that I've taken out of the book, and look at the in red. I've looked at the conclusions that I can make to extract out of that evidence what I can understand about the bureaucracy. Okay? Centuries of bureaucratic and institutional memory. This is important because when we ask ourselves, why did Thailand manage to do what it did in such a short space of time? It's because it has this institutional memory. You know, it's not like you just develop this in half a century after independence. It doesn't work like that for them. The other point that I want to make is that, and this is something that is also pointed out in other literature, is that the authority in Thailand, in this case the state, is highly centralized, but it also has devolution. And the devolved authorities work very well in this two-way situation. So when I interviewed the director of GI in Bangkok, she confirmed this to me. She said, I haven't actually been anywhere outside of Thailand, and all the work that is done to market, to brand the GI products are done by my other colleagues here in Bangkok and my colleagues in Europe and in the USA, wherever the market is. So there is this two-way relationship between the decentralized authority and the devolved administration. And the second thing I want to point out is that the processes of occupation, resettlement, displacement, these things have been happening for centuries. So while they might result in trauma, we learn coping mechanisms that allow us to understand this history as it manifests outside, in culture. Okay, so the next one. Okay, now we move on to Thailand and GI itself. So this is one of those little markers that I make for myself. I just removed architecture and replaced it with GI, and then the country-specific Thailand. And we see, what is this now? It's now about branding as a form of practice. So I've looked at what kind of themes are associated with what points, with topics. And you will see this at the end when I make my summary. Next one. Okay, so this is the GI Act of Thailand itself. You can see it was in 2003 that they came out with the act. So they had 20 years of that in 2023. Next one. And within that space of time, they have created this whole discourse, this output in text, branding material, which we can examine for ourselves today. So I'm going to look at two things. The list of GI, which is actually very old, it's 2019. And at that point in time, they had about more than 100, and now they have 210. And I will look at the magazine that they come out with to show you just what they've got out there. So even with this cover, you can see Thai food as soft power vanguard. If this is not branding for you, I don't know what is. This is next one. So this is the 20th anniversary issue of the same magazine. And I will look at the things inside only of one issue, but just to show you a broad overview of the next one. So this one is more recent, 2024, issue 7. So you see here the feature in this episode, in this publication is rice. Next. And this one is about fruit. You have everything there that is on GI, on the cover. And the last one. So this is what I'm going to look at in a great more detail. This is actually 2021. And it's useful because this is the time of pandemic when everything stopped. Yet, we have this issue here. So let's look inside. Next. So this journal, these are the general topics that they deal with. So we have the leaders talk. We have GI Society, the registration, and the shop, etc. And then we have trip, which is equivalent to tourism. Next. Okay, so this is the first 2 pages, the cover and the person who's leading the GI department right now. Oh, not GI department, actually, but the Intellectual Property Office. Right, next one. So, a little bit more about what it looks inside. So this is like a normal, publication that comes out online or in print. But let's look at the details in the next page. Right. I'm pulling out here parts of the pages that are relevant to us. And what are the things that come out? Local wisdom, uniqueness, uniformity on page 5, page 7, page 8, the shopping guide, and tourism, your wonderful trip to Shanghai. Next. Okay, page 3 and page 4, we have a list of the multi-awarded producers and the traders. And the next one. Here, I'm looking at the specific language that they're using. Marketing opportunities, inspection, certification, and an understanding of who the audience is, domestic and international. Okay, next. Page 7 and 8, we have Thai still and the markets. The next one. Here, look at the language. Distribution channels, national and international level, and then you have the innovation. So this is what we need for the creation of the market for GI. But not just that, we need, as the people who apply for it, to be able to meet these demands. We have to have a transparent supply chain. We have to understand the whole value chain that's different from the supply chain and who the audience is. Okay, next. Here, so this is just an indication that they have this detail on the back cover here, and that's what happened, I believe, they brought that out because of COVID. So despite everything, running to a standstill, they still had, things were still moving. Okay, next one. So, this is just the next one, please. Right, so this is the next publication we look at. This is the list of products that they had at this point in time. Next. So they have a map of the whole country. Now it's divided into regions. Next. Here. So each region has its own group of products that they come out with. And the GI director told me that their goal was to have one product per province. Can you imagine that? So I don't remember now how many hundreds of provinces they have, but given that they now have 210, they must have more provinces than that. Okay, next. Okay, so this is just me pulling out from that book what the province looks like in terms of geographical scope, and then a quick list of what's there in that province. And this is only what will fit on the screen. Okay, so we have 24, northeastern Thailand, next. 31, northern Thailand. See, they have a banana, 2 kinds of pineapple, 2 kinds of coffee, sticky rice, and there are other kinds of rice in other regions. Next. Eastern Thailand, more pineapple and durian plus mango. Next. 27 products, Central Thailand. So you have the lychee, pomelo, plum, and durian. Next one. And I believe, this is the one where Bangkok is, I'm not sure. So here you have rice again, coffee, pomelo. Next. Right. So this is what they've reduced the application process to. They have a streamlined method of applications, which makes it easier for people to understand what they need to come up with. And the next one, please. Okay. So one of the things that struck me in my conversation with the director for GI in Thailand was that she said, Estela, we cannot do this from the top. We cannot say to the farmers, we would like you to apply GI for this product, because whatever happens, if they're not ready, it's not going to move. So they apparently wait for the producers to say, this is where we are now. We need help. Can you help us to move forward? Now, unless people are already organized, in particular smallholders, so that they can do this, it's not going to happen for us either. So the next one. Right. So now we have come to the stage where, they can complete the form, submit it to their first line of application at the lowest level of municipal government, and then it moves up and down the chain, and then they can move forward with it. Next. Okay, so now we move to the Philippines. Now, Peter had talked about this earlier, and this is from his book, which people out there should be reading. I think you can find an online copy of this from Food and Agriculture Organization of UN. Now, I'm pointing this out because there are 4 things that are listed here. The geography, of course, which applies to the land, characteristics of the soil. So this is nature. And then you have nurture, you have history. And I'm pointing out history here because this is something in the Philippines which really we have to start taking seriously for branding. We cannot pretend that it doesn't exist. Okay, next one. So this is just a list of the GIs that I got from Peter back in 2020, which I've updated. And so you see here that Thailand has 210, and there's 16 foreign. So foreign down there for the Philippines is at the bottom of my list. We have Parmigiano and Prosecco, etc. So, kawawa tayo. Okay, next. Right, the only reason I put this here is because this is to point out that we have always been receiving assistance for trade. And the real question is, what have we done with it? And how have we moved forward with it? And for GI, this is where we are now at the bottom. So we're going to have something in 2025. But we have to look at where we go forward with it, and we have to demand transparency for it. Because, it's one of the biggest problems here in the Philippines, is transparency. Next. Right, this is just to show you how it all fits in. So we have US aid on one hand, which apparently doesn't exist anymore. And then we have the aid from European Union and then France, where we are now. Okay, next. Right, so this is one of those little markers again that I've made for myself. So I've now gone back to that original one I showed you that helped me to understand architecture and the discourse in architecture. And we move to the next one. So here, I start to change it and use the same outline for myself in terms of method. And look at Thailand. So look, I changed the culture of architecture to nation, and then the object into the commodity, and the relationships into entrepreneurship, which is what we're looking at. And the next one, here we have what it actually looked like when I used it for myself. And the next one is what if we do that for the Philippines, okay? So I put all these question marks because not only do we not have any idea about some of these things, but the fact is we are still problematic about the question of identity. Okay, so we also have to understand global trends, you know, commodity marketing, and then we have to understand entrepreneurship in the Philippines at the lowest level. It's not just entrepreneurship for large companies, but for farmers, for small processors. Okay, next one. This is just to show you this discussion I had earlier for Thailand, and we moved that to a discussion in the Philippines. Next. So, what is the relationship between central government and local government? Now, the answer to this, you can agree with me or not, but the fact is we have no institutional memory in terms of government. We don't have a government or a form of authority that is hundreds of years old. Pre-colonial institutional memory. Also, the territories are very decentralized and divided. So at the local level of politics, we have not platforms, but, as I showed here, bossism and warlordism. And you can already see that, you know, in the politics of the current election. And where does history fit? Nowhere. Okay. Next one. Right. So if we look at that map of terroir that Peter gave us, and we look on the right hand, what kind of relationships there are existing between the different levels of government, you know, we really have a lot of catching up to do. And the reason I'm showing it to you is because I do think that we as individuals, as members of groups, of organizations, we have a role to play in asking for this transparency and improving the situation in the future. Not just in our generation, but also in the future, for the generation of our children to come. Next one. Right. And that's where I'm going to end. And I just want you to keep in mind that the process for us will be more important because in many cases, we probably won't be able to get GI for many products that require fixing of the value chain, the supply chain, and building up, you know, the skills that we need to get to that point where we actually get GI. So that's where I want to leave you.
Thank you, Estela. It's interesting to note the importance of knowing one's history, culture, and geography. It's unfortunate that our officials think they can compete on the world stage without knowing history, geography, and culture. It's impossible. I mean, our tourism program is premised on just advertising our beaches and coral reefs, but you know, there's value added actually when you talk about history, culture, and the specificity of a particular place. But of course, you need a very different type of bureaucracy. I was told by political scientists that the difference between the Philippines and its Southeast Asian neighbors is that our state bureaucracy is weak. It's not able to stand its ground against oligarchies. But anyway, we can discuss that during the open forum. Meanwhile, let's hear now a reaction from Mr. Ige Ramos. He's a food author, a writer of many books on Filipino culinary history and culture. One of his most outstanding books for me is that book, Republic of Taste, which is really about Cavite, his province. In a sense, it is really about the terroir of Cavite. Now, I asked Ige Ramos to come because of his advocacy of terroir for decades. In fact, the word he developed for it is, I think, even more evocative than the French. The word he developed for it is kapuokan. Pook means a specific place. Kapuokan means, therefore, the spirit, the specificity of a particular place. So let's hear from Ige Ramos.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, Peter. Hi, Stella. Hi, Doc Butch. Hi, Dr. Emma. Good afternoon. So I've been making notes. So this is like really a pressure, for me. I'm not. I'm an independent scholar. So basically, I'd like the terroir's embrace. So how do we unlock the value of Philippine hyperlocal flavors? No? So I've long championed the unique narratives embedded within our regional ingredients, no? But somehow I don't know where to begin. So with my discussion with Stella, I met her in one of the Intramuros years ago. I listened to their talk, and then when I was like stranded in France, she gave me a care package of chocolates, single origin chocolates, which I nibbled, slowly when I was in France. No? So it's very interesting. My God, I cannot read my writing. Okay, so the recent discourse on the geographical indication and the appellations of origin really resonates with the examples given by Estela and Peter, no? Particularly when we consider a vast and often untapped potential residing in our economically challenged communities, no? I had a long messenger discussion with Stella prior to this talk, no? So as discussed and by Peter and Stella, no, for far too long, no, the extraordinary bounty nurtured by specific locales within our archipelago has remained really undervalued, no? And its distinct character lost in the homogenizing of current mass production, as Peter mentioned, the McDonaldization. And then GIs also offer a powerful antidote to this, acting as a shield that protects not just a product's name, but the very essence of its being, no? The soil it springs from, the climate that shapes in, and the generation of knowledge that have cultivated it. So I actually downloaded the book sent by Stella last week, so I have a quick read. So in my book, Dila't Bandila, The Search for the National Palette of the Philippines, and also The Republic of Taste, The Untold Stories of Cavite Cuisine, the term Kapookan is mentioned as the Filipino equivalent for the French term terroir. To expound on this, we need to understand both terroir or terroir and how Kapookan encapsulates its essence within the Filipino context. I think this is like what we lack still, no? So it's very interesting that Estela gave us the Thai experience, no? And then and in understanding terroir, Peter Hex explained extensively, no? I mean, I wouldn't go to this. Just basically, terroir is a French term with no direct English translation, but it's now used by BBC, and it essentially refers to the taste of place, no? So the unique set of environmental factors that influence the characteristic of an agricultural product. Most notably, it came from the wine, no? So basically, what I gathered from the two speakers, no? So they talk about the soil type, the geology, basically the climate, temperature, rainfall, the sunlight, and then of course like topography, the altitude, slope, and then the orientation, where the slope faces, no? So we can include in topography, we can include Estela's architecture as evidence, no? So one example would be the function of Ifugao houses in the rice terraces and how they store the rice, no? And then the kamalig storehouses, where salt or asintibuok are stored before going to the market, no? And and then of course, like the biodiversity, the presence of other plants, animals, and other microorganisms in the area. Then of course, human factors, which explicitly explained by Peter, no, even Estela, no, wherein traditional farming practices, cultivation methods, and even the historical and cultural influences of a region. And may I add also, aside from historical and cultural, we could add political influence, no, particularly dealing with the agents of state and cultural policy makers, no. So the concept of terroir, or for that matter, kapookan, is a specific combination of these elements, no, in a particular location. Let's say in Bicol or in Cotabato, in Lake Cebu, no, and it imparts a unique quality and character to the product that's grown or produced, no, in that area. And with this, no, the concept of kapookan, like coffee, tea, and cheese was mentioned, and in Thailand, grains are grains like rice and pineapples, no. And we saw the what Estela showed us in the Thai model, how easy it is to register the a GI product, no? And then with that, we have to educate our politicians, no? And with that, I would like to include, no, kapookan, or the Filipino terroir could be used in branding as praxis, as Estela mentioned, no? So I introduced kapookan as the Filipino word that encapsulate this complex idea of terroir. Breaking down the word can offer insights like pook in Tagalog means, or in Filipino means, place, location, area, or region. And then the suffix "an" often denotes a place of or related to a place. So you have words like pansitan, bulalohan, bibingkahan. So therefore, kapookan literally translate to something akin to the essence of a place, that which is inherent to a place, no? Because when we mention terroir to our farmers or to our students, it's very, very abstract, So parang we have to find a sweet spot where they can actually understand and relate to a particular, that particular terminology that can cover all, what terroir is actually explaining, no? So by using kapookan, it will highlight Filipino food and ingredients that are deeply connected to their specific geographical origins and the unique environmental and cultural factors of these places, no? So regional Filipino dishes are not just about recipes, but also expressions of their local environment, therefore culture. The ingredients available in the climate, the climate, and even the traditional knowledge and practices of a community contribute to the distinct flavors and characteristics of a dish from a particular kapookan. So, I forgot who said this line earlier, no? So we live in this time of contradiction. And actually, it's true. The examples that I found, especially on the eastern seaboard of the Philippines, which is like always hit by the typhoon, no? So yung eastern part, like Bicol, Samar, and down to eastern Mindanao, I found a very, very interesting uh, candidates for listing, no? For instance, taro or gabi. I've been in touch with a Bicolana author, and I suggested her to write about the pillars of Bicol cuisine, which is pili, sili, gabi, and nyog, no? As their four distinctive products. So pili was mentioned earlier by Peter, and then sili, especially siling labuyo, we can actually list that as a contender for GI because there's a confusion now with what we can buy in the market. Yung tingala variety from Thailand is actually marketed as labuyo, which is like 3 times bigger than the labuyo or the kotitot, which is called in Iloilo. And then I discovered also when I was doing field work in Palo Leyte, because Peter mentioned Nok Nam of Vietnam, that they have listed it as a, their patis as a GI. And I think the Philippines, especially when I was in Palo Leyte, I saw hundreds of different fermented ginamos, no? And where they boil half-ripe banana and then it's dipped in different ginamos, no? So the fermentation process and how it's processed in the terroir or Kapookan is actually indicative of a GI. And there's an industry in Palo Leyte or in also in Tacloban where they actually make the different types of ginamos, from fish to shrimp to even fish innards, and everything's harvested within the community, no? And then again, no, and then when they eat their lechon in Palo, they don't pair it with rice or puso as in Cebu. They pair it with gabi because gabi is a preferred or kamote because these are preferred form of starches. Okay, so dami pa. Sorry, I'm making my time. So think, of course, like Guimaras mango now, the Philippines first officially recognized GI. Its unparalleled sweetness and aroma are linked to the unique terroir of the island, no? So it's a very, very interesting thing also how these are what metrics that they use, no, to make Guimaras mango, no, as the first Filipino GI. So the implications extend far beyond the single fruit, no. So we have to consider also the potential for heirloom rice varieties of the Cordillera. Each grain is a story of ancient terraces, rituals, and indigenous farming practices. A GI for this could not only command premium prices, and then it can help empowered communities like Estela and Peter mentioned earlier, who painstakingly cultivate them, but also safeguard the precious biodiversity and cultural traditions they represent, no? So in a nation rich with regional culinary treasures, from this, let's say for instance, no, I think Tita Clara's there from Mamacita. They make different vinegars. So we have distinctive vinegars used in Kinilaw, let's say in a particular coastal town. In one of the vinegars that I tasted is the Sinama in Western Visayas, in Sagay and in Iloilo, no? So very, very distinctive vinegar from coconut, and then using a mixture of different like herbs and spices like galangal, the local ginger, you know. So that can be explored also, no? And then, of course, like we have the unique rice cultivar from the Mountain Province, um, the Umnio rice, and then in Kalinga they also now it's part of the Slow Food Arc of Taste, no, the listing planted by the farmers from Pasil. So these GIs offer a pathway to economic empowerment that is deeply rooted in the place, no. So they provide access to markets that appreciate authenticity, allowing our producers to compete not on volume. You see, GI is not about volume, but on the inherent quality and story of the ingredients. Now, this is like part of the lecture I give on experience economics, by telling people that local is the new premium. No, so we have to valorize these things, no, these products. So this in turn fosters rural development, create livelihood, and stems the tide of migration from our agricultural heartland. No? So these designations serve as a vital guarantee for discerning consumer, which expressed explicitly by Estela. And when you see a GI mark, you are not just buying a product, but you are investing in a legacy, a tradition, a specific geographical identity. Its unique selling proposition, to borrow a term from advertising industry. It is a promise of quality, a testament to a unique origin, and it's a bulwark against the tide of imitation that often undermines the value of genuine craftsmanship. That was mentioned earlier by Dr. Shalsita. Of course, the path to realizing this potential is not without its challenges. And establishing and maintaining these systems require investment, education, and robust enforcement. No? So we must empower our farmers, our craftsmen, and our resources to navigate the registration process, no, and adhere to necessary quality standards. So collaboration, strong producer organizations, and then transparency from our government. The support is really paramount, no? Like with DTI, DOT, Department of Agriculture, even the Department of transportation, and even the Department of Highway and Public Works. These are like really, really important, what do you call these tools, no? Agencies in the government. So I think we have to, going back, no? The problem actually lies with the education. So we have to educate our politicians, our appointed secretaries of the different departments of the Philippines, and so that's it. So that's my reaction. So thank you so much for inviting me to this forum.
Okay. Thank you very much, Iggy, for these excellent comments. But first, I'd like to thank Peter, Damary, and Estela Duque for their excellent and inspiring presentations. And in fact, I told Butch and Melis, and Kirsten is not here anymore, that your presentations, and especially the comments of Iggy, defines the next level of the Cultural Heritage Program, which basically I proposed to Butch that we should have a transitory action research on the context of and obstacles, challenges of why GIs are not able to proceed very well. Okay, and Iggy, I'm very happy that you think the place, the sense of place, which I find it very good, because in our climate science studies now, context, the historical structural context is so central to understanding why we will have, climate impacts or not to the poor. So I'm very happy about your pointing out that, and also the notion, because people, I remember years ago, Butch was talking about terroir, and, but here, I like that Iggy pointed out, puok, kapuokan. That's why we have Galing Puok awards for local governments, because it's the identity, a sense of place and origins, which I think, like I remember in my interviews of domestic helpers in Paris and Belgium and in London, I asked them, where do you come from? And it says, oh, from Cebu. Then upon digging, from Surigao pala, she went to Cebu. But it's really that we Filipinos, we think that if you come from the province, you're backward. You're not, farming and, traditional ways of doing is associated with the poor, the uneducated, the illiterate. So for me, I like the idea of, place, identity, and the state that Estela was about. So anyway, I'd like to open this now to questions and answers. I would like to ask, yes, can you come here? If you have questions, you come to the center, identify yourself, and what is your question? And is it addressed to anybody in particular? Okay.
Hello. Hi, I'm Lauren Kelsey Santamaria from 3AB DIPIR, and I have one question for each of our speakers. Okay. So first, I have a question for Mr. Damary. So you emphasized a while ago that GIs is like a standardization of products that are meant to enter the market. And my question is kind of related to climate in a sense that, if you are to advocate for GIs in the Philippines, do you think that will contribute to the community's incentivization of continuously reaping the benefits from their environment and therefore contributing negatively to climate change and all that? And then for my question for Ma'am Stella, this might be quite long, but I remember reading Doreen Fernandez's, I think it was Palayok, and then they emphasize, Doreen Fernandez emphasized that a lot of our foods had a lot of foreign influences. And therefore, it's really difficult to narrow down which one is truly Filipino. And then that statement is kind of echoed with Nick Joaquin's comment that the Filipinos' identity is that they keep on asking themselves what their identity is. Because Nick Joaquin contextualized that in a way that our history is marred with foreign influences, that the Filipinos nowadays only have expressions of their identities that are mostly from Spanish or Chinese or whatnot. So my question is if...
The captive mind.
Yes. So like for my question for Ma'am Duque is that you keep on emphasizing history and identity, but how can we apply that in the Philippine context wherein we can't really narrow down what our identity is and we can't even trace what the true Filipino identity is historically? So that's all.
Talk to the anthropologist and the archaeologist. Okay, Estela and Peter.
Okay, I guess I'll go first since the question was first addressed there. GIs and climate change, very good question. One thing with the geographical indication is that it is the community of producers, the value chain community, that defines what is in its book of specification, how the quality has been created over generations and so on. So they're the ones, and it will depend on what they include in their book of specification, which will either impact negatively or positively on issues of climate change. Now, the state can sort of intervene and say, well, if it's intervening negatively on the climate change, then the book of specification might be modified, but GI is not directly a tool for to address climate change. It can help if the community includes that in their book of specification, but it's not the main objective. Believe me, I know climate change is the most pressing issue we have today. Yeah, don't try and make GIs resolve all issues. It has its specific role, and that's it.
Still?
Okay, is that clear as an answer?
Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Estela, microphone.
You're muted. You're muted.
There. So my turn.
Yes.
So the question of identity, that is a loaded question, but I will give you a simple answer and a more nuanced answer. The simple answer, have you seen this book? This is Dr. Zialcita's book. It just came out, Insular Yet Global. And he deals with the question of Filipino identity there in several chapters. Go get it. It's available in Ateneo.
That's what I meant when I said read anthropology and sociology and archaeology.
So a
works.
more nuanced answer coming from my background, which is is obviously in architecture and agriculture. I would say that the problem of identity really is that you first have to accept what that history is. And part of the reason it's so difficult for us to pin it down is because there are parts of our history which are so traumatic. And to accept that as part of the complete identity creates an internal problem for us.
Yeah.
Now, in architecture, we are forced to select what parts of that historical narrative we will represent. Okay, we don't have a choice. We have to choose. The site is given, the client is given, and the materials are given. And so to some extent, we could have a range of aesthetic representations that we could choose from. And that pins down what kind of identity we want to infuse the final object. Now, if we begin to see ourselves as the final object, in this case, if we pre-select only the non-traumatic parts, then that is very problematic. And that is why, for generations and generations, we cannot pin down what that identity is. Now, I gave you the example of Thailand, which has centuries of, traumatic incidents within several generations. And this constant, and I guess non-negotiable acceptance of what this means and what it means to actually include that in their story is something that we have to learn from, I think. It does help that they have a centralized authority, and in many cases, even if you say that the narrative is controlled, in the end, we are now in the 21st century, and their cities began in the 14th century, which is even before the West arrived in the region. I mean, I think you have to admit that we have to give ourselves the time to also get to that point. It's just that, for many of us, there's only one lifetime. For all of us, in fact, there's only one lifetime. But we can teach the generations after us to negotiate that exchange. Now, I'm sorry, I probably didn't address it specifically, addressing Nick Joaquin and Doreen Fernandez, but the best way for me to answer it is to give you the factors that I understand best.
Thank you. Thank you. Still, I would say to the young people that we have to be conscious. What kinds of ideas are we consuming? Who produced those ideas? Who produced those histories? And that's why I really like Ege's notion of kapuukan, to go back. You know, I really believe that we have to work at our rooted identities. And I think I would like to challenge, especially the students here, to be conscious of what are you consuming that lead you to think of our identity in that way. And I said, you know, as Estela said, read Dr. Shalseta's book. Read all the archaeological writings of our archaeologists, because they are really changing the notion of Philippine historiography and the like. So, are there other questions? Yes. Can you please come to the microphone, identify yourself and your question, to whom is it addressed to, and keep it short and sweet.
Hello, everyone. My name's Sophie Pontespina. I'm from Davao also. So I'm very interested in the topics of conservation and food heritage. So they're very close to my heart. So my question bounces off a topic that Peter mentioned earlier, but I'd love to hear from either or both of our speakers. Perhaps there's a precedent in your experience with Thailand. So my question is this. So I think when it comes to small...
Question.
Yes. So the idea of competitiveness between artisans and the industrial producers was brought up earlier. And I'm curious how GIs can help small producers shift to a more collaborative attitude instead of competitive, so that they can, in a more collaborative sense, or is that the correct question? Is competition important, or is collaboration something that we should be striving for with GIs?
Perhaps the topic of is still about the state as a mediator of power and relationships. Yes.
I think we should let Peter answer first, because he's only got 10 minutes left.
Okay.
If he has something to say, we should let him say
Peter,
it.
are you there?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Puntespina. Are you linked to the chocolate producers here in Davao?
Yes, yes I am.
Good, okay, lovely chocolate, great cheese. Okay, having said that, your question is very interesting in that the idea of a GI is to gather together all the value chain actors, all the different small artisans, but they can also ally with larger companies to work together on some aspects and to stay competitive on others. So it's not a cooperative, okay? So it's really, they work on defining the quality, on guaranteeing the quality, and on promoting the product. The story of the product, as we've discussed a lot. That's the idea behind GIs. And that, as I said, it's not a cooperative. So they don't share capital tools. They don't share buying and selling of the product. Cooperatives can play a very important role, and I think they do play an important role in many products. Again, the GI cannot resolve all issues. It's a specific tool for something. One advantage is really that it can bring all these actors together for them to I think the term is co-opetition. So cooperate on some elements, compete on others. Okay, that's the theory. I don't know how well that would work in Philippine context, but yeah, that's all I can say.
Still, can you talk about, because for me, the elephant in the room is about the power and hierarchies in our midst at the local, at the provincial, regional, and national levels. And I think we can learn from Thailand in the sense that the state is not a divisive, but basically a cohesive factor, or the try their best at least.
Yeah. So I want to add to what Peter mentioned and say that I in my presentation, I mentioned the value chain and the supply chain. So the supply chain is important because it shows us, how the raw material is related to the final product and who are the intermediate agents in the process. Now, the value chain is important because it looks at the complete cycle and connects the beginning to the end, and asks the question, it lets you ask the question, where is the equity? Now, Equity is important because in many cases, the equity only remains at the end. It goes to the final producer. And this is why Peter's point is important, because the equity has to be distributed from the farming level, the producer, and the invisible one, the invisible agent, which is the worker. You know, it could be a farm worker, it could be the driver of the delivery trucks, or so the whole chain has to have that equity. So when in addressing your question about competition and cooperation, ultimately I think, and Peter can correct me, before the GI is given, they have to be able to see that the equity is distributed within that value chain to the different members. And to respond to the question about the state, the role of the state really is to make this possible for people who apply it. Now, with Thailand, obviously, because the centralized authority has a very good two-way working relationship in the different levels below it, it works much better. And I want to mention that the issue there is not educating the politician, because the politicians and the bureaucrats already know what their job is. Okay, that's our problem. So in that sense, it's quite different.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
May,
much.
may I just
Yes, Peter.
rebound on what Estela just said? One of the concepts in geographical indication is because the raw material has to come from a certain geographical area, it limits the risk of competition from outside. See what I mean? So if we take cases of cheeses in Europe, the cheese has to come from the Gruyere region. There are only a certain number of producers there. They have to follow a certain quality criteria because it's in the book of specification, and that's what guarantees the quality of the final product. And therefore, they are in a better position to negotiate their price with the downstream actors. Again, this is all very theoretical. I understand that, but that is the concept: is that it provides a, you know, when the industrialists are buying raw materials throughout the world, they'll just look for where it's the cheapest. They can't do that with the GI. They have to look at the raw material that comes from that specific area because it's got those specific qualities and so on. So in that way, it helps the farmers, the primary producers, gain more of the added value of the product. Okay.
But Peter, I just want to mention that even within a region, you could have different sizes of players. And so, for example, you could have one individual who owns 150 hectares. Then you have 100 smallholders who don't have a leader. And so that's something that we need to make sense of in the Philippines. It's quite...
Yes, absolutely. And that's where, as a foreign influencer, sorry about that, I have to really rely on people like yourselves who understand the Filipino social political culture much better than I can. I can only bring in the experience of Europe and of other countries, but then it has to be adapted to a reality which is quite different here, especially in the social structures, I mean, which are difficult.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, we only have 1 minute left. Let me conclude this by telling you two things. One, I've learned in running the coastal cities at risk in the Philippines for the last 5 years, managing 15 to 20 scientists from the physical, social, and humanists, that to innovate is to collaborate. But to innovate is also to navigate the systems, micro, meso, macro systems. And now I talk about intersectionality of vulnerabilities and capacities. What I'm saying basically is that a lot of us avoid issues of power and structures, but we, as Estelle says, we have to embrace. We have to embrace the dynastic local conditions that we find ourselves. And Butch was telling me we should look into the obstacles. In my work now, we talk about challenges and how we can navigate around the system that we can go to our goals. I think Philippine politics has put us to either or, black and white. There's no middle ground. But for me, we have to look at that. I always tell people, we construct our own tragedies. You know, I look at the statistics there in Asia. We have the lowest IQ. Our students have the lowest IQ and the lowest and the highest learning poverty. And it's because of how we, and I will not go into that, but really I want to challenge everyone here. If you do not write, then you'll always be reading about what other people write about you and you're dissatisfied. So as I always tell my students, it's our national duty to document, to look at your, as Ige says, look at your own locality and how your practices and your sensibilities are shaped by those, okay? So I challenge everyone, because I just told Butch, this should be the next level of cultural heritage studies, focusing on the challenges of developing the GIs here, but it means you have to do basic work. Documentation and the history, the identity, and the practices about, you know, food growing, food consumption, lifestyles, and patterns, okay? So, Peter and Estelle, are you still there? I hope to host you next year here. April, by the way, is a food month. March is Women's Month. And May is the feast month of, you know, May is the Feast of San Labrador, the Feast of the Farmer, because it's the harvest time. So I hope we can have that, because I think the notion of geographic indications for our products or ideas, you know, products are embedded in the ideas of how we produce, how we weave ideas into action, ideas into products. And I would like to just conclude the reason why I want to introduce the notion of the state and the market. Because I remember the first question was about, you know, how do we prevent people from earning a living from the environment? I would say it's the market that drives these people to extract, because what sells, the fact that root crops are considered, you know, low value is because we are socialized, or at least say that consuming processed foods, imported goods is a class. That is how the elite behave. And when I say I challenge you to look at the kinds of ideas that you've been consuming, the kinds of books, the kinds of things you've been writing. So I hope next year we will have some products of your local documentation of your practices and why like that. So I think we have to, as Estelle and Peter said, the great work has to be done by us, okay? So, and remember, to innovate is to collaborate. But to collaborate is to navigate the systems, okay? I hope with this, I hope next year we'll see you again with new ideas, new products, and new ways of engaging each other so that we can be more productive, we're more happy with our identities, our products, and our engagements with ourselves and with the world. Thank you very much, Peter, Estelle, and Iggy. Where is Iggy? I like very much your idea of kapaokan. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
kapaokan, great word.
Yes.
I'll try and bring that into the discourse with IPO Phil.
Kapuokan,
Wonderful.
kalugaran.
Thank you.
You know,
Bye-bye.
yeah, plenty of things to study and to publish. Yeah, can we have a picture, please? Here, please come over here and we pose for Iggy and Peter in the, you see, documentation. Documentation. Okay, Leo, please come.
She did a wonderful paper on
Yeah,
durian in Davao.
I know, but it doesn't find its way to publication. Publish, publish, or perish. Yeah, that's the only way. You publish. Orality can only last a generation. Okay. Okay. Hey, come, Isabel, come. No, there's one. Okay, Leo and everyone. Hey, we include all the technical staff. We're not like those who are in. Bernie, come. Everyone. If you want to be part of the story, come and show up. So Estelle and Peter and Iggy, I hope we can have that next year, okay? Food month is April.
Sige po. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Dito ho sa akin. One more.
And then you take a selfie. No, no, that's the way. A new skill
1,
is taking a selfie with the group.
cheese. Okay.
Okay, Christian, selfie. No, 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 no. Selfie. Sige na, that's a new skill. Yeah,
1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. See you. Yeah. Iggy, we'll see you. Good luck in your lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Emma.
In-
Thank you.
Sa Jordan ba?
Oxy. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I want Clara and the Mamacita to be ambassador of our food systems. Yeah. Thank you, Estelle. If you are here in Manila, you please pass by. And yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sige. Sige, okay. Still, the OB festival is in Stuttgart. In
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was Frankfurt.
No, 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 in Stuttgart. The OB festival, but
Yes po.
but the Philippine consul, I know